Hey everybody, Mike Rollins here again with another of my interviews with candidates to fill the vacancy at the end of this month for chair of the Texas Democratic Party. This is my next to the last interview I've got scheduled, so coming down the home stretch. Today we are joined by Delia Parker-Mims, Denton County Chair. So say hi to everybody, Delia.
Hey, everybody.
So Delia has served as, excuse me, we were talking before we started here about pollen in the air, and I may have to be clearing my throat a little bit. Has served chair of the Denton County Party since 2021. Under her leadership, Denton County has increased voter turnout, expanded voter engagement, and record-breaking fundraising. Now, Delia is running to be chair of the Texas Democratic Party, bringing her vision of Texas Democrats, one team, to unite and energize Democrats statewide. I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied today. It's been a long week already. She believes the key to winning in Texas lies in strategic voter registration, targeted turnout efforts, and expanded messaging that resonates with everyday Texans. Delia's experience as a grassroots organizer, an attorney, and legal advocate, and dedicated party leader makes her uniquely qualified to lead the Texas Democratic Party into its next chapter. So as I've started out these under interviews, I've kind of set the context that with all the insanity happening in DC and certainly in Austin, this kind of internal focus we've had the last few months on selecting a chair for the Texas Democratic Party seems a little bit surreal almost, but I think it's important to take it in context that people do understand the importance of this position. That was certainly clear to everybody who came to the forum in Grand Prairie a few weeks ago, where we must have had 300 or 400 people turn up. Considering the only people who can vote on this are about 150 of us on the State Democratic Executive Committee. So there is a lot of grassroots interest in this. I think people are ready to get off to a new start in the party. So I'd been asking candidates to tell us a little bit about themselves so people can get to know them beyond just, the 1 minute that they get in the forums. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about to Delia about her experience in Denton County. That's largely what she has been running on and bringing that vision to Texas as overall. And finally, some of the problems she sees with the state party, how we've been running campaigns, and how she would like to change things. So again, welcome, Delia.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you are a practicing attorney. So what kind of law do you practice?
So I do a lot of family and I do juvenile. I started off as a civil rights attorney back in the 90s, and
Okay.
I learned civil procedure really strong doing that. We were plaintiffs' attorney back before the Supreme Court made it more difficult. We worked with unions, we
Yeah,
worked with
right.
individuals, retaliation, ADA, and then I was working with a firm in Dallas, and then I decided to branch out. So I started doing a little more family law because I just kind of thought of the idea of helping people who reminded me of my mom when she needed a lawyer back in the 70s. And so I brought
Hmm.
that there. And I do a lot of juvenile law where I work with juveniles who typically have some type of disability, but they find themselves in the court system. So that's been a really strong challenge and a big push on from my part.
Interesting. So are you a native Texan? Did you come here from somewhere else?
I am a native Texan. And
Okay.
I am from El Paso, Texas. I was
Okay.
raised in El Paso and came to the DFW area in the 80s when I went to SMU. I went to
Okay.
college there and I went to law school there.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good background if you want to practice law in the Dallas area for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I'm trying to remind myself of some of the questions I wanted to ask here. How did you get involved in politics?
So, I've always been I've always been involved either as a precinct chair or as a donor. I am in Denton County, which is largely red, and I'm a lawyer. So a lot of my colleagues and judges, they're either Republican or they try to appear that way for the
Hmm.
judges. So I've always been very aware of primaries and things of that nature. And it wasn't until I guess Obama ran and things started changing, and I realized I needed to get personally involved just so that I can really just find more like-minded people in my area. So
Hmm.
I started going to the county party meetings, and then after the 2018 race, when Denton County was able to flip HD 65, there was some talk going on about that candidate that we won. And so I started getting really involved, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to run at this point, and I wanted to run for commissioner, largely because of my work as a juvenile attorney. And I think
Hmm.
that we are criminalizing disabilities with our children when we're kicking them out of school. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to run and just be a different voice so that we could try to increase mental health services for our juveniles. And from that moment, I've just been involved ever since.
So you ran for county commissioner in 18 then,
I ran in the 2020 race, but it was
2020.
the 2018. I got started really early. I ran
Okay.
into who we call out here Black Jesus, and that's because I ran against a Black Republican older
Uh,
lady, and she prays a lot. So that was a very interesting experience for me. It was I received so much hatred just for having the nerve to run against a Republican than I've ever experienced in
hmm.
my life.
Yeah, I think we got over that hurdle in Collin County probably 10 years ago, but there's still a lot of, I'd say, over the edge Republicans here as well. I remember what it was I wanted to ask you, and just so people will understand. As I think most people know, the chair of the TDP actually ought to be a full-time position. If you do it right, it is. But we did not, the state party by convention did not decide to make it a paid position until the state convention this last summer. So what I've been asking other candidates is, how do you plan to support yourself for the next 14 months anyway? And just to verify, you told me earlier you have been able to maintain your practice while chairing Denton County, which I know from experience, even a medium-sized county like Denton can be almost a full-time job. So you intend to keep up your practice and do the state chair's job.
Well, absolutely. It is a volunteer role, and I don't personally think anybody should be expected to give up their financial ability to run for that. But I do think it needs to be full time. And so right now in Denton County, getting us to the point where we are now, I've spent full time
Yeah.
organizing this county. And now we're at a point where we are organized. We do have structure. And I feel like it is that's what's going to be needed with the state party chair is going to be needing that full-time organizing attitude until we get to a point where we have structure, and then you can start being more of a chair, because there's different roles for chairs. But right now I think the organizational structure of TDP is very similar to what we had in our county party and in lots of county parties. So it does require a lot of strategic thinking in minds. But the thing that I want to emphasize, it's not the chair that's going to fly in like Superman,
Oh, yeah.
change everything. There has to
Uh,
be organizational structure and leadership to develop that. I don't profess to know everything about everything. And anybody who does, like I tell them, if your lawyer is going to promise you you're going to automatically win, go with that lawyer, not me, because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to strategize, I'm going to do my best. But you've got to be able to find leaders, bring them to the table and create a plan, and then have the strength and the courage and the power to, and the boldness to execute that plan. Now, you've been a county chair, so you know what it means to work with Democrats and how difficult. So
you
you need
bet.
a
Yes.
leader that can help create that vision. And the only way we increase engagement around the state is all of us working together. And that's been my theme running for chair, is becoming one team.
Right. So you have been running largely on your experience as uh, Denton County Chair, which I mean, I probably would too if I were in the same position. There are only three of the eight candidates now who claim to have any experience as a county chair. Kendall Scudder was uh, like interim chair for several months when he was in college of a smaller county. As you know, Lily Schechter was 5 years as chair of Harris County. And you are going on your fifth year now as chair of Denton County, correct? Since
Uh,
2021.
it's my fourth year. It was kind of like November of 21.
Okay. Okay. So, when just looking back on my own somewhat scattered knowledge of Denton County, some of the rural counties around Dallas, we tended to try to work with each other. So it didn't work as closely as we might have, but tried to keep tabs. And I know a few activists in Denton County. So I know, not to disparage anybody, but my impression from those who were there and during the period, the two chairs prior to you, and certainly based upon your own credentials and accomplishments, I would say probably a fair statement to say Denton County was not the epitome of a functional county party before you took over. And I would say, bringing fundraising from 20,000 up to like tenfold, 200,000, got it up from pretty much a non-functional range to a respectable range for a county your size. Um, and also, certainly, your increase in number of volunteers and voter registration. So, I think it says anybody something for your record that you were able to come in and take the helm at a county that wasn't doing very well and actually brought it up to a pretty good functional level. So what kind of lessons did you learn from that? What were the challenges that you experienced in all of that?
Well, first of all, it's a red county. So all of those accomplishments,
Mm,
I would say times it by 10. You want to talk about our fundraising going from maybe 20,000 to get out the vote to 200,000 in about 7 weeks. That was a excruciating process when you're in a county with low engagement. You have lots of Democrats who want to hide. You
mm,
have rich landowners who don't want to come out as Democrats, but understand the necessity. As a lawyer, I walk around the courthouse, other lawyers come up to me and whisper in my ear, when are we going to have this? But yet none of them will donate. So the
right.
accomplishments that we have made cannot be understated because we worked in a county that did not have the boldness that we have now. And so what I've learned is to increase engagement, the boldness has to start with leadership. And being in a red county that is a lot rural, a lot suburban, and just a little bit, we share some urban precincts, but mostly suburban and rural,
Mhm,
um, is is a remarkable thing to do because people are afraid. But you have to start with that boldness from the top. And we increased engagement by being bold. Every time I've been on the ballot, I've been able to increase engagement by letting people know I'm a proud Democrat. And that has trickled down. It's the only thing that has trickled down, right? We know that there's no such thing as trickle down like Reagan,
right.
but boldness trickles down from the top. And I think that is something that I've learned. I've learned that Democrats and the volunteers, they want to have structure and they want to be engaged in a way that is productive and effective. And when they are, they're excited. So the precinct chairs that we've been able to increase and get them actually working, not just being precinct chairs, is because we've created strategic plans for them to go out and execute where they don't have to sit around and figure out what to do, but we've given them a strategic plan. And all of this comes from a team leadership level, putting the right people in place who understand how to move the needle, who understand strategy, who understand engagement, who understand um, from social media, increasing our engagement there to increasing our activity within the county has helped us to move forward and get people mobilized. So what I've learned is you've got to have a strategy and you've got to be bold enough to execute it.
I think that's pretty true, pretty basic too. Um, Not everybody has that level of boldness, though. I think you'd agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
One of the things that interests me in particular is the increase of voter registration that you guys have been able to do. I did do a little bit of digging. Denton County was gaining like between 30 and 55,000 registered voters per year total from 2020 through 20, well, I shouldn't say that, per cycle from 2020 through 2024. And on your website, you talk about being able to register 20 something thousand new potential Democratic voters during your tenure. Now, I wanted to ask during what time period was that? And secondarily, how were you able to do that? I know kind of during this period, just a little bit of background. After the 2020 cycle, the TDP had a initiative to try to register like 1 million new voters for the 2022 cycle. It did not work out. That program never really got off the ground. And then after the 2022 election, as part of their strategic plan after that, the state party, I should say, de-emphasized voter registration with the idea they would hand it off to allied groups like Battleground Texas. The complaint I heard from the people I know who were working with them was that Battleground likes to register everybody. We want to register Democrats. It doesn't do us any good to register Republicans. So, how did you guys go about registering that many folks? How long did it take? Tell me about what you did.
So that wasn't a matter of months. It wasn't a complete year. So I sat down in this seat in November of 2021. And the
Mhm.
very next month, we kicked off our initiative called Fight Back Register 50. And my strategists on the team, I will put them up against any strategist anywhere, but we're overlooked because we're women just working really hard. But my strategist is a professor of social psychology and understands numbers. And our Fight Back Register 50, we branded it with a t-shirt, we branded it everywhere. And we had the idea that volunteers want to be given a task that is doable. So rather
Mhm.
than saying we need 30,000 votes, we need 30,000 people registered, we said, we'll give you the name of 50 new people who moved to our county. Denton County has been flipping between Denton and Collin as the fastest growing county. We
Mhm.
flip back and forth. And I think we're like the fourth fastest growing county, maybe even in the nation between the two of our counties.
Yeah, a lot of growth in North Texas.
So we have a lot of new people moving into Denton County. And what we did was we did work with TDP, and it wasn't easy because they didn't actually believe what we were doing. And
Right.
we wanted them to give us the data of people who moved to Denton County who were Democrats, who had a
Mhm.
Democratic voting history. So instead of setting up at Walmart or trying to go to trailer homes, which worked in Georgia because largely
Mhm.
those parks were Democratic. It's not the same in Texas.
No.
We went to the doors of Democrats who moved to our county, and each month we gave our volunteers a list of 50 names and voter registration cards. And we went to their doors because what Stacey Abrams did was register Democrats. And you have to do that in order, if you're in a red county, as you know, you
Mhm.
can't register your opponent. Now, of course, by law, you're required to register whomever asked to be registered, but you
Right.
have a right to target.
Mhm.
And so we didn't just say we're going to go to apartment complexes and assume everybody there was a Democrat, because that is simply not the case in Texas.
Not by
And
any case.
and it's and our trailers, our trailer park areas in Texas are largely Republican. And those are kind of the spots that they did in Georgia, but it just is not the same in Texas. So we did that. And each month we would meet at the same place in Denton County. We had 3 different locations around the county so that people didn't have to travel far to get their list. And we had it on the north, the southwest, and the east side of the county. We would have one location 1 to 3. It's not a meeting, it's not a program. You just come by, pick up your packet of 50, pick up a t-shirt if you want one, and then you have a whole month to go and do that. And we did that from November um to about May, and then that's when we started focusing and changing to we looked at our municipal election, and then we started heading towards fundraising, and then we got into our GOTV. So that's what we did.
Okay. So, were you able to successfully get all the leads from the TDP, or did you have to go to other sources?
We we worked with TDP every single month, and I will say we were successfully able to do that, although it wasn't easy, and they
Okay.
didn't often think of they really didn't know what we were doing because they were like, well, how do you know? What are your metrics? And can you be sure if they registered? And they just kind of didn't really feel what we were doing. They weren't feeling us. But the thing is, we had to do something.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I
Hmm.
took over, we had to do something, and we knew at that time we needed to start focusing on registering. And we did. And in the end, in that year, Denton County ended up being #1 for percentage increase in the state for registering. And I will tell you, we can't say for certain that, I mean, we don't have the metrics that we can go back and say every house we hit, they registered. We simply know that we hit 27,000 doors. And when we had that massive volunteer program in the end, Denton County ended up being #1 in the state for registration increase.
That's a pretty impressive accomplishment. I know when Collin County tried to do an initiative over the summer of, I think it was December of 21, probably about the same period you were doing that. There was gosh, I forget what app it was, but it was an app that was going around that was supposed to help you register people who weren't registered. But we found that, again, there was no discrimination about likely Democrats. And
Right.
even at that, the data wasn't that good. So the efforts that were undertaken here were not all that successful.
Yeah.
So, in that context, being able to register 20,000 in that period is pretty good accomplishment. So, before we leave your record in Denton County, I do like to give candidates a chance to address some of the criticisms that have been raised about them. And just in terms of context, I know you will appreciate this, that it's very hard to do the job of county chair without pissing somebody off. I heard a quote from Winston Churchill not too long ago, that I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, "You've made some enemies? Well, great. That means you stood up and did something." Enough to get somebody mad at you. So, uh, the folks that I have talked to were not, I think, as impressed about the voter registration, probably as I am. But the criticism that they made was that registration and turnout is one thing, but actually winning seats is another. So what I've been told, I didn't go verify this. I'm going to ask you about the facts first and then give you a chance to answer. The criticism that I heard from them was that you actually lost a few Democratic seats during that time. And if that is the case, is that the case? If so, what's your take on that? What would you attribute that to?
Well, everybody will criticize, and you're absolutely
Oh
right.
yeah.
I personally don't have any enemies, but I am a strong leader, and I'm a woman, and I'm a woman of color, so that comes across hard because we still live in America, and whether we're Democrats or not, we still have those challenges. I'm a
Mm.
strong leader, and what I don't do is I don't apologize for being the leader. And so that may, people take that however they want to take it, but that's exactly how you have to lead when you're working with Democrats. I will say that going from increasing our volunteerism, increasing our precinct chairism, increasing the leaders speaks in and of itself to any of those who want to criticize that. But as far as what we need to do to win in the state of Texas is exactly what we did in Denton County. There was a seat that we lost, and that's largely because we've had two elections where we've had a complete increase in Republican turnout and excitement.
Mm,
Particularly in this last election, we saw that Democrats didn't actually vote. Our high Democrats did not
right.
come out for Kamala.
Mm.
And a lot of that is internalized because we as we polled, we found out that people didn't like having not having a primary.
Yeah, I'd like to delve into that a little more. But just before we leave this topic, one thing that those folks did not mention, which of course came into play in Collin County, I'm sure Denton as well, is redistricting happened in 22.
Yeah,
So if you're comparing turnout, if you're comparing election results by district from 2020 to even 22 or 24, with the amount of gerrymandering that went on, I would not be
yeah,
surprised at all about, some seats not being as strong as they might have
yeah.
been.
That's
But what,
that's actually correct, and I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the seats we did lose was our HD 65. It was
and
actually
that's the one that
district.
Michelle Beckley had won, right?
Yeah, she won it and she defended it, and as a prize, they redistrict her into HD
Right.
63 as
Yeah.
a benefit because Kronda needed to you know, I say Abbott was her daddy, but he had to cut that seat for her. But yeah, but I think that goes to Mike the idea that some people still believe that you can flip Republicans and that gerrymandering is an excuse. That is not an excuse. And I'm, for one, not a person who will entertain the idea that we can flip a Republican. I think
Right.
there's lots of people who may have voted Republican, but those who say, I am a Republican at this point are not flippable, especially if you
Mm-mm.
voted for Trump 3 times and you believe the Lord is telling you to be a Republican. So
Ah,
the grassroots engagement
yeah.
that we did, increasing voter registration, increasing Democratic turnout when Democrats don't want to turn out, but not having that trend in Denton County, I think is phenomenal. And those who hate are most likely those who were not participating in this process because pretty much all the volunteers are excited about the efforts that they've achieved.
Right. Now, you were starting to talk about something that I had read about on your website, which really intrigues me because just to set the context, after the election, there was all sorts of speculation, talking heads about what happened. No, most of it I found just to be a complete waste of time because the only thing we could tell for sure was that a bunch of people stayed home. Like at the top of the ticket, oh, I think it was like 3 million nationwide. Uh, let me put it in exact context. 3 million people fewer voted for Harris in 2024 than voted for Biden in 2020. So we know Democratic turnout was down at the top of the ticket. So the only thing that we're really, I shouldn't say the only thing, the main thing that interests me was why the heck did those people stay home? None of the talking heads I have listened to since then had anything to say about that. A lot of speculation, but no data. The only two things that I've seen have been right here in Texas in the Metroplex. There was a consultant I've known and worked with off and on for several years who actually did some post-election surveys in Dallas County, came away with some interesting data. And I learned from looking at your website that you did some canvassing and some kind of research, actually talking to voters in Denton County after the election to find out why they stayed home. So tell me about that and what did you find out?
So we did a couple of ways of polling and researching, and we did it immediately. One thing we did was we talked with candidates because they were the ones out there knocking on the doors and phone calling.
Mhm.
And
Right.
they had a certain perspective, and we were hearing prior to even the election that it was going to we suspected it was going to be a low turnout given the kinds of things our candidates were reporting that they were saying. And then after that, we sent out a poll to people to find out, why did you stay home? And I mean, it's such a myriad of things. Like you said, we learned for certain that I don't really believe in polls anymore. right? The only poll that was correct
Dubious.
was the one person who said whoever wins the race is going to win all the swing states. That's the only poll that was ever correct. But we found that a lot of people did not, they were not inspired. Our high Dems were not inspired by the top of the ticket as much as the high Republicans were. We presumed everybody who was a Democrat knew that they needed to vote and that it was important, but we heard Republicans constantly saying, "You guys were denied your right," and we kind of overlooked that. But in the end, people really did feel as though that the establishment pushed their own candidate onto the voters. Number one, but then number two, we have to take responsibility for our lack of engagement.
Mm.
Because if we look at the Valley, they voted against their entire interest. Everything
Mhm.
about that valley is going to be under attack by this administration because they didn't believe, not I won't say believe, we didn't engage them enough to know that Democrats are in fact fighting for the working man. They are in fact fighting. The valley has twice a high as rate of uninsured people as the rest of the state, and yet they voted Republican. But it's the Democrats who are trying to expand Medicaid, who are trying to increase health care for everyone, increase wages, but we didn't engage enough. And so the messages that Republicans were sending out regarding what our values were as Democrats, we did not challenge them and say, no, we're still the party of the working class. We're still the
Right.
party helping us, that is trying to help us achieve the American dream in our household. So our lack of engagement, we have to take responsibility for that. In addition to the fact that people were just not as inspired. I don't understand it, but then I do understand it.
Yeah, so that kind of neatly segues into what you think the major problems of the state party are and how you would go about fixing them. Uh, I know, give you a chance to address this too. One of the criticisms I've heard from some of my colleagues on the SDEC is, well, Delia has a great story to tell about Denton County, but she doesn't seem as engaged or maybe knowledgeable about what's happening in the rest of the state. So if you could address that along with how you view, what are we doing, what are we not doing right now, and what do we need to fix?
It's kind of like Kamala Harris. She was the vice chair and people said she wasn't experienced. And it's like, you're the actual vice chair of the job you're running for.
Hmm.
And it's kind of the same. No, I'm not an SDEC member. And I'm happy to say that I'm not, because what I have learned is that the state party has no organizational structure. And I want to break that down because maybe it sounds like words. But as a county chair, in a county that is red, in a county that is hostile towards Democrats, in an
Hmm.
age where Democrats are not enthused to get to the polls, but they seem to be in Denton County and they seem to be wanting to register because of what we've done. I absolutely believe it's the same process and the same formula to move from county chair of a county that resembles the state of Texas a whole lot into state party chair. And when I say organizational structure, let's talk about your caucuses, your Black, your Hispanic caucuses, your LGBT caucus. They'll all ask every candidate, well, how are you going to increase Black engagement or Hispanic engagement or let people know? And my answer is the same as it would be in Denton County. What are those caucuses doing to increase engagement? And are they a part of the state party's strategic plan? Have they made a quantifiable pitch as to how they want the state party to work with them? There's only been one caucus that kind of did that, and that was the Hispanic caucus, in the sense that said that we would like the state party to do 3 designated programs to the Hispanic community, and with them being the leader of that. So now they're talking to me with words saying, this is how we want our caucus to be a part of our strategy. All of the caucuses need to be a part of the strategy. I, as the chair, regardless of being Black or female or whatever my identity may be, I am not the one that is going to increase engagement in those distinct groups. It is going to be us bringing them into our larger strategic plan and putting forth an actionable plan that helps us engage with those populations. That is what I mean. That's how I think. I'm a lawyer. I think in that terms of strategy. So in terms of coming from being a county chair to TDP, anybody can say, well, you haven't had TDP experience. That That's possibly true in a sense, but I have worked with TDP and I've seen how they do not listen to county parties. And I do know that flipping the state runs through county parties. And we
Mm.
have county party chairs that TDP will, they will try to send us stuff to do. We didn't have to do that in my county because I have strategists, but they're not even at a point where they can receive that information because they're so far less developed. They don't even know what van stands for. And I'm not criticizing them to be critical, but simply to say that's you have to understand where people are at. And we have many county chairs that are lost and need more of a development. I understand.
Right.
And I've actually been working with them in my position right now as the county chair of Denton. I have
Mm.
reached out to other counties and have been asked by other counties, well, what processes are you using? The other thing is, I think it's important to bring fresh eyes. When you've got a business that's burning up, you don't promote from within, you bring somebody from the outside and you start from scratch. And I tell everybody, if you think we're going in the right direction as TDP, I'm probably not the person you should vote for. I'm the person who believes we're not going in the right direction at all, and we need to stop. I say stop, drop, and roll. We need to stop, drop what we're doing, and roll with a new plan. Okay, that's what you do when you're on fire. And I think right now there's a lot of fires going on, and it's a huge flame, and we just burned up these last two cycles. So, correct, I've never been a part of TDP. I'm proud of that because we're not going in the right direction. And I think that's what makes me perfect for stepping in and bringing a new, fresh eye, not beholden to the old ways that things are done, but saying, no, we got to do a new, fresh approach.
Right. So you mentioned working with some of the smaller counties. Um, Denton County, like my experience in Collin, is one of a handful of these kind of in between suburban counties where I'd put Fort Bend, Williamson, Collin, and Denton kind of all in the same bucket that we're satellites of a larger urban county. We have some of the same problems, but not the same problems. We may or may not be able to afford much staff, but we're certainly farther evolved in our processes and what we're doing than some of these smaller counties you talked about, where you could have an executive committee meeting sitting around somebody's kitchen table. So given that disparity, I think a lot of the candidates have recognized that and have various ideas of how we can support the needs of the various counties, uh, various sized counties. I did mention in one of my interviews recently that I thought, the large urban counties are largely self-sufficient. And from my experience with working with a couple of chairs in Dallas County, a lot of them had the attitude that just regarding the state party, well, just stay out of our way. Let us do what we need to do. But I was corrected at least on one point that the TDP, like you mentioned, was helpful on at least a couple of things. They helped on the vote by mail program. As you were saying, they helped you guys with the voter registration. What do you see as the role of the TDP and how we need to change in terms of better supporting this whole range of county parties that we have?
So I think we've got three different areas, and I do think each area is different. As you mentioned, the urbans, you've got Houston, Dallas, and those larger urban areas. And then you've got suburban and then suburban rural, and then just in rural kind of separating. Suburban is like our fastest growing communities in Texas, but rural is a lot part of it. I think all three of those types of counties have different needs.
Mhm.
I do not believe that like I said, I don't believe you flip Republicans, but that doesn't mean you ignore rules. Okay, I believe our rules are ignored the way Texas is ignored at the national level, and it's not to our benefit.
Yeah,
Because
I think there's a lot of consensus out there among a lot of folks, especially those living there, that if we can get some of these rural counties up 5 or 10 points, you
right,
know,
right. So that goes to increasing turnout, right? So we want them to increase
how's
turnout.
that?
It helps that statewide candidate. So I think in creating a strategic plan, we have to take into consideration that one size does not fit all. And right now,
Right.
that's how TDP works with all of the county parties. And then with our urban counties, they're happy being blue, but that is not sufficient. In order to
No.
win statewide, they can't just, well, we're blue and we won seats. They have to be deep. They have to go deep and be blue. So we need them to not just be blue, but we need them to try to overcome all those votes that are coming out the rules. So they're going to have to dive into a deeper level of get out the vote to try to get more people. They need like 80% of Democrats and up voting because we've got to go deep in those rural and I'm sorry in those urbans to account for the rules that we have. And I think that that is possible, but their engagement is going to be different. And unfortunately, a lot of those urban counties are more sophisticated and they should have more sophisticated chairs and strategists in there willing to work. But we've got to go and work with them and say, thank God you guys are blue, but we're going to need you guys to increase your turnout if we're going to win those statewide races. And then you've got
Right.
suburbans like my county, suburban rural, where we're going to be trying to increase our turnout. And in fact, that gerrymandering, it didn't just happen on a statewide level. They literally came and gerrymandered the precincts within our county. And
Right.
one of that was when I ran for county commissioner. They wanted to because it was the next seat. We had flipped HD 65 and this commissioner seat was the next seat that we were trying to figure out what we could do because of the way it turned out. And Beto was only behind like about 4 or 5 points, right? So we thought this could be our next flippable seat. But the commissioners, because I was running and nobody had ever ran against Black Jesus before, decided to redistrict before the census because they wanted to ensure they could push that commissioner seat out really.
Before the census, I was not aware of that.
It was Mike before I was able to even run. I at the end of 2018, after that one race, and I decided I'm going to run in 2019. I went and talked to the elected official. I started early and then they immediately said, well, we're going to redistrict. So my campaign had to start a strategy to prevent them from doing that. And so
Mhm.
the whole first year before I could even really run for commissioner, we had to campaign against the commissioner's court. And I didn't participate in it. I created the strategy,
Right. Mhm.
but we sent honestly, we sent a white male attorney to the commissioner's court. He took on this race like no other and built a coalition of people coming in saying you can't redistrict, you're going to disenfranchise disabled seniors, this and that if you don't have an accurate census. And the force just kept growing. Teachers started coming and then finally we saw one day the commissioners are going to rescind their desire to redistrict. And so that took several months. And then after that happened, we went to the commissioner's court when they decided to rescind it. But then immediately after that election, they went ahead and redistricted and threw
Sure.
this race, the commissioner's race, they did what they did to 65. But it took a lot of strategy, it took a lot of working and I guess, politicking that body to do it. And we didn't have any Democrats on the court. And it, once again, everybody told my team, you might as well give it up. They're going to redistrict. There's no Democrats on the commissioner's court and you're going to lose. But we didn't. We actually won.
Okay. So you had mentioned something earlier about increase in turnout, which prompted another problem that a lot of people have talked about off and on. Some of our bluer areas, and I'm thinking in particular El Paso County, they consistently, at least up until I didn't look at the 2024 results, but historically they voted blue, but turnout sucked, which was fine from the county and from the state reps and state senators down there, but we're leaving a lot of votes on the table for the statewide races when something like that happens. And there's been a lot of discussion about the failures in the field programs in Dallas County and elsewhere about around the state, especially the urban counties. where we did not work the base like we probably should have. Um, how would you go about addressing some of those more particular kinds of problems where, somebody's in a safe Democratic seat, for example, and they're not working their seat or working with their county party because they think they're just going to get elected anyway. So how do you address that kind of a problem?
So I write a lot about that on my website, or briefly or touch it. I don't know how far I go into it, but I believe there's four legs on this table: fundraising, engagement, voter registration, and get out the vote. Okay, those are each of those require its own type of strategy that needs to be implemented. I capsulate all of that under one team. So you're exactly right. There are safe blue seats, and those people in those safe blue seats, those their state senators or some of those house districts have to start increasing engagement. And if we worked as one team, then we're not going to be satisfied with saying, well, I won my seat.
Mm,
If you're sitting on millions of dollars and you know your seat is safe, we have to become one team. So in our district, the seat that we thought was most flippable at the time was HD 63, when they redistricted Michelle Beckley to HD 63. And we looked at the numbers. It was a little bit smaller than when she flipped it in 65. TDP did nothing to help us target HD 63. We did target that race. And so part of engagement, which I say is one of those four prongs, and when I talk about it, is we have to start engaging our populace. Okay, engagement is why we lost the valley. Our 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 elected officials support everything that the valley needs, but we lost them. We don't have town halls. We don't have grassroots town halls. We're not meeting people where they're at. Young people are not on Facebook. They're on Snapchat. They're on Instagram. Um,
mm,
people, there are certain populations that still like the phone. We need,
right.
right. And if, like, for instance, with these municipal races in Denton County, we've been able to save Denton County from a MAGA takeover in our municipals and our school boards. That's a huge investment. We had a person run for school board who spent $70,000 and we beat her. In fact, her husband was Ben Bumgarner. He's the one that won the HD 63. We didn't spend anywhere near that because we were using the grassroots methods of calling people. Our seniors love to pick up the phone, and they're the ones voting by mail. And when you have
Mm,
small turnout, you can protect those municipalities and those school boards. So the point is, we've got to increase engagement. We've got to look at Texas as if it is one team, not my
mm,
one race, but one team. And we have to get our electeds, even if you're not in that area, to come out and say, you know what, electeds in Austin have been fighting for healthcare. We've been fighting for your right to maintain your schools being funded. We have to let people know what we believe in, what we support, and we need to engage them. And those electeds who are sitting around not doing anything because they're safe, they're no different than Republicans who don't want to give up power. Part of my philosophy as one team and engagement is not only putting them to work, but increasing engagement around the state with not only what we have done, but with what we're supporting and what we're going against. So we have to do that, and we have to look at it as one team and support those races that we can. Now, we did do that in Denton County because my strategist that came up with all of our Fight Back Register 50, our get out the vote strategy, very, very grassroots. We didn't just text. I think some of those counties just texted. We
right.
home banked, we block walked, we texted, we did social media, and we paid for that for all of our candidates. We paid for individualized social media campaign advertising. But my strategist created a pack called Save Our Schools and identified, I think it's HD 37. Um, it was one of the House district seats in the Valley. He's a lawyer, ran against an Uber driver. The Uber driver won, but she was able to donate $30,000, not because she's rich. None of us are rich, but was able to put together the fundraising mechanism that we learned in our county party and created a PAC that went and gave about 5 different House district races a lift, that
Mm.
were being ignored by TDP because it was more of a popularity contest with TDP as opposed to looking at numbers. That race that she helped, that seat flipped back to being Republican by 4 points. That
Mm.
means it was winnable.
Right.
4 points. That means they should have been engaging, and that was in the valley. That was Gracia, Jonathan Gracia's race.
Mm.
Nobody from TDP helped that race, but we were looking at it as one team. At
Right.
this point, we're organized in Denton County. We didn't invest as much money in this election, but we still increased turnout because at this point we were experiencing economies of scale, meaning we
Right.
had developed our mechanisms on how to get out the vote or how to encourage volunteers, how to get them involved, and so we were being more efficient in our get out the vote, and we were still able to increase turnout. But we looked at it as we've got to be one team. It does us no good to increase turnout if we can't help others. And so even from Denton County, we were able to try to take what we learned, create another entity, and literally give other House district races at a minimum of $30,000.
And I'm sure they appreciated that.
They did.
And you talked about early funding too, which is, as anybody who's been in this very long knows the importance of helping candidates prime the pump, as it were.
Right.
We're getting close to the end of the hour, so I kind of wanted to wrap up with a little more focus back on you as a potential leader again. You talked about how you got into politics. From initially doing civil rights work as an attorney. I'm wondering what else you could say in closing remarks about, why you want to be TDP chair and what you bring to the table that perhaps the other candidates do not bring as well.
Well, thank you for that question, Mike. As you being a former chair, you know that being in a position like that is not one that you do because you want to have the most friends in the world. You have to make
There's
this
an old saying that in Washington, if you want a friend in DC, buy a dog. I hear the same thing about just in general about politics.
right, right. And it's about being effective. And I think all of us that are running are very passionate about what we do. But I
Mm.
think being a leader, particularly with TDP, requires being more well-rounded. And I think when it comes to the many markers that you need as a leader, I think I'm the one that's the most well-rounded. First, not only do I understand the idea of strategy and bringing people to the table to create that plan, I have the boldness to execute it. As you know, as a leader, every Democrat has an opinion. So it is
Sometimes two or three.
right. It's hard to stay focused on that. When we were doing our Fight Back Register 50, when we were doing our Get Out the Vote strategy, everybody, not everybody, but there were people like, well, is this going to work? Is that going to work? But you have to stay true to what your goal is, what your vision is. We're trying to increase turnout. So we're not going to be doing programs that take our volunteers away from achieving that objective. I don't believe
Right.
TDP has that goal right now. I believe I have the strategic mindset to develop that as well as the boldness to lead. But more importantly, in terms of being, you need a leader that can be inspiring, and our very own increase in volunteerism is a testament to that type of leadership style. Our volunteers, our precinct chairs are the backbone of everything that we do, and they're always honored and they're always placed in the front and appreciated, and that helps increase people wanting to work as far as giving them clear objective. And then you have the taking the engagement to a higher level. We've done that in Denton County, and I can do that on the state level. I've been on TV. I've been debating people about the Democratic brand and came out on top. I can handle those type of situations. I think it's important to have a stronger voice at the national level because it's my dream that we all have singular messaging. That's the dream that I have for
Mhm.
Denton County, and that's the dream I would want to have for Texas. And I don't know what I would do if we could do that on a national level, but it would be my goal to try to institute that, to come up with the same messaging, no matter what you're running for. And I believe I possess all of those skills, that inspiring, that charismatic, that strategic, and that boldness that we all need in that type of position.
Okay. Well, I think we're about at the top of the time we had allocated. I'd like to thank you again, really very much for taking this opportunity to sit down and respond to some questions and for me to get to know you better. And I hope for those who watch this YouTube all the way to the end, they feel more comfortable about getting to know you and what you're about and what you would potentially bring to the office of state chair.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you, and I'll see you in Austin in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.